Katie, you're all dressed up. You look all dressed up anyways. You're also muted. You're still muted.
There we go.
Okay. Are you dressed up or is that just a decoy outfit?
I'm not gonna lie. It's a decoy. I'm not.
Good job. You're frozen. You might need to shut off your monitor. The internet's unstable. Or is it just my internet that's unstable?
I don't think it's mine.
Colin is muted. Does he know that?
Call the meeting to order, I guess, Lee.
All right, everybody. I want to call the order.
Yeah.
Just a second. Technical issues.
Okay, who do we need to mute? I guess we need to mute everybody.
Try it again.
Try it again.
Okay, we want to welcome everybody to the Children's Trust Governance Committee meeting and of the September 23rd. And I guess the first thing we do is a roll call. So Ashley, we're both here. Okay. And how do we do? Do we do motions? How does this work?
I think this is more collegial and conversation. So I can just take you through the schedule of the meetings, what I'm proposing. And then we'll get right into what we have here. So there should be an item 1. Looks like this. Maggie, do you have item 1?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I do.
Yes, if you can hear me, just so I make sure.
I do. I'm sorry, I was muted. Yes.
Or she cannot.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear her though. Why can't I hear her?
Oh no.
Someone's got to unmute. Okay, go ahead, Maggie. Talk again.
Can you hear me? Huh. Hang on.
Yeah. Oh, I can hear you. All right, so only my computer is unmuted then. Okay. All right, so you see item 1, right? The schedule?
Yes.
Okay. So today, this may be fiction. It depends on how much behind the scenes work we can get done here, but we'll see. The main things today are things we wanted to get done before October 1. So we could because we're changing some vendors, we're changing from the clerk's office. We have a new outsourced human resource company, and there's a procurement thing we definitely need to take care of because I don't want to go through that anymore. Then for the rest of the 3 meetings, we can take some more time. Now, in the notebook, Maggie, which you don't have, but everyone else has, we have in there our current policies, a whole list of our current board policies, a list of our current employee handbook. We have our bylaws in there. And I also included all of the Meridian policies that you gave me several months ago, if you recall doing that. And so this is the schedule. So I thought maybe since we have Katie on, if it's okay, since technically you're the chair, Maggie, for this meeting.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I just deferred to Lee automatically.
You can. He can always, rule from on high whenever we need him. But what I thought we'd do is take care of the 3 business items first, and then discuss how you want me to go preparing, for the next meeting. Really, is what I thought. So the first one on there, and Lee and I talked before. What we planned on doing is having a governance committee report out of the meeting. So whatever we come up with, you will recommend to the full board that they adopt whatever it is discussed here. And I had to put something on the agenda just because of the timing of the meetings, but whatever we change, we can just go ahead and change it at the meeting if that's okay with both of you. Okay, so the first one that I just wanted to make you aware of was the investment policies. And my recommended changes on there, and you will find those as item 2 in your agenda packet, starting on page, the resolution starts on page, I'm going out of order. That's okay, I'll go out of order because these should take the least amount of time.
Okay.
Starting on page 27 of your agenda packet. And literally all that was done to the investment policies is change from clerk or assistant clerk to executive director. That's it.
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't see anything there that didn't make any sense. If we're going to take over our own finances, then it certainly can't be the Alachua County Clerk of Court that does.
So the chair asked, so you're not going to be running investments, are you? The answer is no, we don't have any investments. Right now, everything's paying low interest, and so everything's sitting in a bank account. If we did decide, and probably around January would be the time to decide, because that's when I'll be ready to the board to kind of present a plan for fund balance, then what we would do is we would procure the services of an investment firm. That's pretty much what everyone else, that's what the county does. It's what the library does. That's what all my colleagues do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not running any investments. Bob had some comments. Bob, I read all your comments, but I had problems, couldn't figure out how to print them and remember where they went. So, and I think the one, you want to go through those? Would you mind? Because I don't want to skip over those. I want to make sure. Now, just so you know, Bob, you may not know, or maybe you do, I don't remember. These investment policies were handed to us from the clerk's office, literally. So some of the stuff, there was some specific stuff on there. I was like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I think the one at the end was probably where you had made a suggestion on maybe an investment committee or something. Maybe, I don't know, say whatever you want. I think you had some good ideas. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, other than the topical, just the tech terminology things, I think if you're going to do any sort of internal decision-making process, you have a finance committee.
Mm-hmm.
And they would meet with the investment company or whatever to look at options, and then they could bring that to the trust.
Yes, and we don't have any committees. And I'm just looking on my schedule. I had meant to, the bylaws are also going to be included in this notebook. I don't know what tab it is. What tab are the bylaws? Is it tab 5?
Second to last.
Or is okay, well, my notebook is not. Tab 4. Tab 4. And we also might want to look at the bylaws because we don't have an audit committee or a finance, and we might not, I mean, that's for y'all to decide if you think we need all that or not.
I'm not on the meeting, just to let you know.
You're off the meeting? Okay.
I'm trying. You know, whether or not you
Can you help him, Ashley?
whether or not you have those is you can get along fine without them, just relying on outside contractors.
Okay,
So I was kind of reacting to the fact that, well, it's in there.
I got it. Yeah, I don't intend to run any investments. So,
that's not some, you know, it's just as easy to have your outside auditor come to a trust meeting and discuss it, and have the investment company come to the trust and discuss it. And then their point of contact would be you. It's just, you have a treasurer, so it's my thought was, well, you need to get the treasurer doing something.
okay, good point. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. So that might not even really, would we need to change? So is there something in the policy you'd recommend to specifically reference the treasurer? Because we don't do that, right?
Well,
that was your comment?
You know, if you aren't going to plan on doing anything with that anytime soon, I'd just say put that on hold.
Okay, that's what we'll do.
And figure out, once you want to move on it, talk to an investment, you know, figure out who your investment broker is going to be, and get their guidance on it. You know, who do you want to, you know, how do you think this should be structured from the standpoint of an organization our size? You know, you don't necessarily want people focusing on their subcommittees, as opposed to the trust meeting as a whole.
Okay. All right. So were any of the other changes you had, you thought material that we needed to incorporate in the investment? Well, I just couldn't print them out for some reason. It's probably because I didn't know what I was doing. I know there was one of them I didn't know what to say.
Sadly, I don't have what I sent you.
Oh, I can pull it up. I'm sorry. Let me do that. I can do.
In my mail, because it's still updated at the moment. On this machine.
I can do that. Just give me a second here.
You know, I think that the key thing is just that you have, you know, since you are dealing with, I think my question had to do with, you had a list of companies, and I didn't know whether all those qualified under Florida law. If those came from the clerk, then of course they are.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
And you know that those will give the guidance as to this is the sort of company that you could invest with. But again, you know, once you have money that you're going to set aside into, you know, hold for fund balances and get some investment income off it, you know, and get a company that's actually going to be doing that, then you can get whatever they require, because they're going to require different things. And then just backfill and have a new policy about it. Yeah.
Okay. Were we able to figure out what least trouble is?
Yeah, that's from anyone not even doing anything. I can't access email.
You can't access your email. Okay, so you typed in the AOL from the web and you're not getting it. Okay. The only way to access it is through his email, right? Okay.
You want my computer?
I'm fine. So when we have this discussion at some point, I guess we talk about what we do actually have some money that could be invested.
Yes.
I mean, so the fact that we're not doing anything with it, I don't know that that's we do need to do something.
Yeah. So I think the plan was how fast are we going to spend down all this money?
Right.
Because if you want to do it faster than what I'm going to propose, right, then you want to make sure it's not tied up. You want to make sure it's in investment interests that are liquid enough to meet that plan. That's all.
Right.
Figure out
Yeah, and I think ahead of that, I mean, we have to figure out what kind of reserves we want that you aren't going to spend down. I mean, I think it would be prudent to have a reserve and a policy that governs those reserves, so that if, you know, the economy or property, we have a little cushion that we could extend some of the current contracts. So I understand and agree that we don't want to spend everything down, but we want to have some provision for reserves always being held, not just because we want to buy a building, but because it's prudent to have reserves. And then kind of go from there.
And we do have a policy. So we have a 5% policy operating reserves every year that we appropriate, and that's about 400,000 in the budget. And then we have a fund balance policy of a minimum of 2 months of expenses. So we have way more than that. The question is, what's the maximum, or how fast do we spend it down? So
Right.
We're going to look at those policies on November 16th was what I was going to suggest. So if there's no,
so let me then ask that, do we have, given that I think we've explained to Bob, we're not investing just now, we will hire an outside financial manager. Can we go ahead and just approve the basic change that's proposed, which is simply to move from clerk of the court to executive director in the existing policy? Is that a recommendation we would make?
If that's kind of the way you want to do it, you know, that's just up to the trust where they want, you know, who they want to have that authority reside in.
Yeah, because if you don't give it to me, then I can't select the outside investment firm.
Right.
I mean, and I wouldn't, it would be a competitive RFP anyways that, you know, the trust would approve. So
The professional services, you could do it by competitive RFP, but you don't want to.
Okay. Either way, if I need the authority to designate the authority.
Right.
There are advantages to doing it,
but
you know, a lot is going to depend on how much you have to.
On how much, what, Bob? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last.
He said how much we have to invest,
right,
or spend. I'm sorry, you said
spend, invest,
yeah,
because you're going to get better deals and the more you're willing to give them.
Yeah.
So my recommendation is you just approve the policy as is, and then we can discuss probably in January getting an outside vendor to manage, because we'll better know how fast we think we're going to spend down the funds.
Sounds good.
Okay. Lee says it sounds good. What do you think, Maggie?
I'm good with that.
Okay.
And that's how we'll introduce it, that we'll approve the current proposed changes with review in January as to once we decide what we're going to spend down. Okay.
And what we're going to hold in reserve.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. All right, good. Well, we made it through one. Great. Little victories. We like to count them all as we get them. The next one is if you turn to page 7 in your agenda book or your packet, it's the resolution for the employee handbook. And I'm literally going to turn this all over to Katie Howard. Y'all haven't met Katie yet. Katie is with James Moore and Company. Katie is essentially our HR department, but she doesn't work here. So she's our outsource. So literally she does everything. So she's figuring out an employee evaluation plan. We're starting to turn over dealing with our benefits people. You know, you do other stuff, Katie. Anyways, and so she helped us with this. And so I'm going to let her go through this and explain all of the changes. And if you have any questions, she's here to answer them. So Katie.
Yes, feel free to ask at any point in time. Thanks, Colin. So the handbook itself was very solid. It's relatively new since the organization itself is relatively new. I did think a couple changes needed to be made. First and foremost, we needed to add the level of human resources into the handbook for employees to contact. I think it cited the finance administrator a lot, and with the change of the role, and actually it's what human resources is supposed to do. It's supposed to be that, you know, almost like a third-party liaison in between leadership, the organization, and the employee. So we added that element to the handbook throughout. And let me see here. There was some changes to the initial 90 days. I choose to eliminate anything that mentions unemployment because the way of the, I'm not trying to get into a politically charged discussion, but unemployment is given sometimes with people who have less than their 90 days just based on either what's going on with the pandemic or the fact that they left, their other employers. So sometimes, yes, unemployment does come into play in the 90-day element. Doesn't mean you have to pay it, but I just didn't want to reference it just because you don't really know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. I'm scrolling on down. We talked about the floating holidays and clearly identified about sick leave and about the introductory period. There was just some question there. It was just more clarification, but it wasn't really a change. Or stuff about HR. We changed up the harassment so that it talked about both sexual harassment and harassment. And then we also get into further discussion about whistleblower and retaliation. These are all very standard policies. I worked with Jason Taylor, who is the attorney, to make sure that obviously we are compliant with what we're saying, but we just wanted to say it a little bit different. Just change our verbiage specifically with the retaliation and whistleblower. We definitely wanted to make sure there will be no retaliation for an individual, but I like to make sure it also doesn't give them, free will to do anything as they want in their employment. So they hypothetically, they do something very egregious. It doesn't mean just because they reported a whistleblower issue that they are now exempt from any discipline at all.
Right. Katie, could you back up a minute? Because one of the things that I saw on page up above that was a change to sick leave saying it would accrue immediately. Is that a change or just something being moved from somewhere else?
That's not a change.
Okay, because it's underlined in green in what I'm looking at.
Yep. It's Maggie. I actually put that one in. It's not a change in practice.
Okay.
It was just a change in the handbook. So people have been accruing
and
their
they had included in the handbook earlier.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay.
It was just clarification.
Yeah, it would help, Katie, if you kind of jumped us to the page you're on, because I
apologize.
I had to scroll pretty fast to catch up.
I am so sorry. And this, I have to say, this is my first, I came from government, so I'm very used to board meetings. This is my first Zoom board meeting, so I apologize. Usually I have a big screen and I'm going, you guys. So I will definitely, thank you, Maggie. I appreciate that.
No, thank you.
Let's see here. And we've gone past harassment. So we're going past 14 and we've discussed prohibited conduct, which is again, going back to the whistleblower. We're still on harassment past 15, just referencing human resources so that they know who to go to, specifically also with the executive director, that they can go straight to human resources and human resources will know what to do in case of that situation.
Is there, and I don't know how this works, so Lee, you may have to educate me here, in governmental or quasi-governmental entities, is there a compliance officer that should be identified? How does that work?
We do have, the county has somebody specifically, but I guess now, based on reading what was in this, I guess Katie would be our human resource.
Yeah, so that's what I'm used to, the HR person.
Essentially, I am a dual role of compliance / HR.
Yeah, and that's how I had it set up where I was. The HR, senior VP of HR was our compliance officer, and the policy said they had direct access to the board in case it was me that was being out of compliance.
And this is about, I've done this obviously again in my government life, but I also have done it in the consulting life with different boards. And it's very common for it to set up, even if you're outsourced for that role, to be that function. Okay, I am cruising on. We are still on whistleblower on page 18, which we talked about. Diversity inclusion. We are now on page 19. As we know, CTAX.
For a second, because I wanted to ask Bob. Bob, you had a comment here on public records.
Yeah, I think that, when you talk about confidentiality and that sort of thing, that you keep in mind that basically everything we have, unless it's exempt, is public record. And you can't really say that complaints will be confidential, because at the end of the time of complaint, unless the complainant withdraws it with no action, it's going to be public record.
Bob, can you suggest some language to put in there that you think would be sufficient to cover that?
You know, I would just say, you know, confidential, subject to the Florida Public Records Law.
Okay.
You know, I'd just be that vague, and it's just from a standpoint of, you know, from a very cynical employer's attorney, scare people off from asking. But if they press it, you know, understand this, and, you know, as long as HR understands that it's public record, maybe they'll say, no, you can't have it. But during the course of an investigation, it is confidential. And then, of course, your stuff like social security numbers and that sort of thing. And to the extent, you know, to the extent that you have people who have worked in protected employment before, their employment information, identifying information such as addresses and such are going to be protected as well.
Katie, can you go back to page 17 and see if you can remember, because when everyone's looking at me like that, I get so nervous. Where does it say confidential?
It's actually the bottom of page 18 and on to 19.
Page 18?
I also see it on C, on page 17, the last paragraph, it talks about confidentiality.
Okay.
Bob, is there a throwaway clause we could add in here? Just says that everything is subject to Florida Public Records Law or something. Is there a way we could just cover that in here? Or?
Yeah, well, that's what I'd say is that, well, to begin with, and I think this covers it, that employees should not consider anything they do at work to be private. But not only that, it is subject to the Florida Public Records Law, so that anything they do could be requested by a member of the public at any time.
Okay. Do we cover that somewhere else in the handbook?
Yes, but Mr. Is it Bob? I'm so sorry. On E, does E cover that? Because it says limited confidentiality. On page 18, reports of concerns and any regarding shall be to the extent and possible lawful consistence. So it's saying within the consent of, you know, within the guidelines of the law. So do we need to clarify more with the Sunshine Law specifically?
All right, well, keep in mind, Sunshine Law is open meetings. Public Records Law is public records.
Okay.
Two different things.
Two different.
And E, at least the version I have, it says forbidden use and content of communications. You know, I would just, it doesn't matter whether it's under A, B, C. Those are the places where I would generally put that all communications through any media. E under what number?
Okay. I've noted it, Colin. I can make the adjustments.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Because we're a Florida agency, I would definitely mention the Florida Public Records Law.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on top of page 19, instead of just saying to the extent and lawful, you could just say subject to Florida Public Records Law instead.
Now, the other part of that is, even though this is public records, employees are not allowed to use it for their own private gain. So members of the public can, but an employee can't take information that's within their control and then go out and make money using that information.
I think we need to put that in. How would we say that?
I think.
Do you want some time to think about it? We could just add it to the agenda because it sounds a little bit more complicated than I thought.
Is that going to whistleblower retaliation? Well, no. That's really an issue of ethics, Florida ethics law, and it's the sort of thing that government generally comes into the possession of information not known to the public. It may be public information, but it's not known to the public, but you don't want the government making money off of that. And so.
So where would you put that in here? Because it wouldn't necessarily go there.
Do we just need a general statement somewhere that says everything in this HR handbook is subject to Florida law and for, you know what, and including public records?
Yeah, I mean, that works for me. And then it's just a matter of making sure they've had training in public records. And I can, as your group grows, I can certainly do that.
Okay. Actually, would you write that down, Ashley? Because we might do that. We'll have a full group come out October 1. So that might be a good idea. That is a good idea. Actually, I think we're supposed to do that. Aren't we supposed to do that?
It's a good idea. It's a good idea to do that on an annual basis.
I'm supposed to do that. Yeah.
And then have everyone sign off that they've attended.
Yeah.
Attended it, because that goes into, you know, some central file.
Yep.
If there's a problem.
Which Katie will keep because now she does that. She'll keep that we all had it. Boy, this is all coming together. This is great.
Well, actually, it needs to be in the handbook that you're gonna have to do, and it may already be there, that you're gonna have to take courses on certain things, which could be included in the, you know, when you have to go through the whatever training you're going through, that
It'll be
part of it.
Interesting to see if LinkedIn Learning actually offers a course, which I have scheduled soon. So
yeah. Okay, so I think Maggie, what you suggested, if I heard you right, just is
stick a general
that
clause. Yeah, just stick in either its own section or some general statement that anything in this handbook, you know, and provisions of how employees, you know, everything is subject to Florida statute, administrative rule, and public records.
And if there are any questions, direct them to a specific person, HR, whoever, to answer those questions.
Okay, Bob, can you draft a statement that says that, and we'll put another section in the handbook specifically to that. I think that's a good idea. You probably got one somewhere in your file. We'll just cut and paste it.
Yeah, I've done this a number of times. I just
Okay.
can't think of one off the top of my head.
Okay. In which case, we'll use that as our coverall, and then we'll train everybody once a year. I don't think you need to put that in the, you can put that in the handbook if you want to. That's more of a evaluation of me that I've done my job. I think that's probably in my job description somewhere to make sure employees know what they're doing.
Well, actually, it tells them what to expect, that there's going to be training involved.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's going to be training on a number of subjects.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to rely on HR.
Right.
What sort of is appropriate for your group.
Right.
One thing, since I'm yapping, on absences, sick leave, seems to me there needs to be a reference that sick leave will be counted, can be counted as FMLA.
As what?
FMLA.
Oh.
FMLA.
Yeah.
but they wouldn't apply for FMLA because they're under 50.
This is a government. FMLA applies to us. FMLA applies to employers with one.
Okay.
For government?
Government.
I've never heard that actually, but I'll definitely notate it.
Well, look it up. I mean,
No, I'm not arguing. I'm not arguing at all.
My primary area is not employment. I'm the secondary attorney for employment, but I looked it up yesterday, and as opposed to some of the disability laws, FMLA applies to all governments. So check it, make sure I'm not speaking out the side of my head, and if I'm correct, then if we could just make the appropriate changes for.
Absolutely.
And what is the main change? It was about, Bob, it was about sick leave counting towards FMLA. Is
Yeah,
that
I mean, if someone's out for a serious illness, what triggers FMLA, for example, could be comp, it could be something else, not your cold or flu, but something I think generally that lasts more than 3 days or something. Then you start counting. And you also need a FMLA policy, you know,
yeah,
on a yearly basis, this is done rollover. And you just want to make sure that you're keeping track of that.
yeah.
Because if you don't, then you may find later on you have someone that's missing a lot of time, and then after they've already taken all their sick leave, they say, oh, now I want protected FMLA. No, you
Yeah.
get protected film.
Believe me, it'll happen.
Yeah, that does happen a lot.
In fact, I think at
Guaranteed.
CHS, when I was at CHS, we ended up outsourcing, keeping track of all that. It just got so risky.
Yeah, a lot of places
Okay.
do that. So it's just one of those things that, assuming it applies, it's best to have that, you know, have a good policy set up for that.
Okay, so we do have
Yes, Bob, and you are 100% correct. I was wrong. I just pulled the
Okay.
DOL. I learned something new today. I apologize, Colin. I apologize, everybody.
Another thing I'm just throwing out there, just for giggles, y'all, when you started, were part of the county, of course, and you had sick leave and annual leave. Have you ever thought about just going to pay PTO?
Yes, I would love to do PTO.
There's a wrinkle to that though, Bob. As I understand it, well, at least we had a PTO system, but we secondarily tracked when it was used because you were ill, because there were changes in the offing for FMLA and some other things that we were going to require employers to do a week of sick leave. I don't know whether that went through, the beauty of having been retired now 19, 20 months. But I know we had started to track the reason. So we had PTO, but then you had to designate whether you were taking the PTO because you were sick, so that we would always be assured that we had a 7-day window. And that was not in a board policy,
Right.
Colin, so you wouldn't see it there.
There may be advantages to keep it the same way we are. I know Pinellas County, when I was there, or just before I came, switched.
Yeah, the city does it.
And so there may be advantages to keeping it the same way, but this is still a young enough organization that, you know, switching now may not cost you as much as it might in the long run.
Yeah, PTO is just a whole lot better.
PTO is so much easier. And you just decide what becomes unscheduled.
Right.
You know, and it's very easy. Call in before midnight.
Well, I can tell you that the accrual for sick leave here is a lot more generous than the actual, what do we call it, vacation leave or something.
Right.
So I really can't answer what's better now, because there is some kind of call. It would change everything, and we'll take a look at it.
Yeah, it's a different calculation. You get more PTO than you do vacation time. There's a trade-off because you can use, you know, basically what you were using for sick time for vacation. And, you know, whether or not you can, you know, some people may want to keep accruing the way it was, and they have rights and such. So it's not an easy on or off issue. It's just that you're young enough now that the transition would not be horrible, but you don't have to do it because after all, the county's been doing it for decades. So, and lots of systems don't. It's just something to think about and discuss with the HR contractor about advantages.
So what we'll do, if it's okay with the board, is since this year, since we'll give out all the funding this year, look at fund balance. Maybe we'll include this as some of the things to look at planning going forward. But I couldn't have an opinion. This point.
Yeah, I think
the
it's
reason
yeah, you need time to look at that. You can't just, you're not going to make that snap decision today.
No, yeah, it's just something to look at and consider and look at the numbers and what the laws are on changing programs. It may not be the best decision. It's just something to look at.
Okay. So, Bob, getting back to the FMLA, you had made some comments in the margins on FMLA.
Well, and that's since
was it the sick leave one? Was that what it was?
Yeah, it was the sick leave, and these are pretty standard things. So now that we know we have to have an FMLA policy, I think that Katie knows what needs to be done.
Yeah, I know where it'll tie in, Colin.
Do I have an FMLA policy? Because we mentioned FLMNA, but I don't really have. Do I have one?
I will put one in. I have a standard that'll be perfect.
Okay, those are pretty standard.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's a
very easy ad.
Okay. All right. So
we have it. So my question is, would we have that for Monday
Yeah.
Or do we just want to bracket and say that we're going to approve these revisions, knowing that they're, or Katie, are these changes that we're talking about going to be ready to look at on Monday when we,
I could potentially, honestly, Colin, with the sense of urgency, I could probably have that done by end of business tomorrow.
Okay.
okay, because I otherwise it's a staggered recommendation.
Well, and I don't want to hold it. I don't want to hold it up. So
I would be
really
fine with either one. I just want to know which way.
We'll have it ready to go. So what'll happen is we'll pass out, they have stuff in their board packet already, but we'll pass out
New stuff.
yeah, or we might even be able to put new stuff on between now and Monday. So when we put together their stuff, we'll have the new stuff. We'll have whatever we want approved, the final version ready for.
Sounds good. Okay.
Don't make me look bad, Katie. I can
I
do
won't,
that on my own.
I already did with the FMLA comments, so no.
Good. That's all right.
I only get one a meeting. That's not.
Okay. Was that it for the handbook? Did we make it through the handbook, all the changes, or do we got more?
We
We're on
have
page
we did
19.
include a diversity inclusion.
I saw that. So you've got an EEI and then you got travel.
Travel.
Non-exempt
Explain
travel.
that.
Non-exempt travel is just clarifying when an employee is paid and when they're not, when they're an hourly employee and they're traveling for the company. So it gets very, very clear as to what is considered paid time and what is considered not paid time.
Uh-oh.
Oop,
Colin
you froze
froze.
up on me, Colin.
Colin is frozen.
No, he's back.
I'm frozen. Well, I can see myself and I'm moving just fine.
Now
you
you're
are.
not.
Okay. So the chairman asked if we have any, what did you ask, Lee? Hourly employees? Yeah, so if you recall, over a year ago, I had the salary study done and the classification system developed by the Mercer Group. And that was a vendor recommended by the county. They did a good job, but he classified almost everybody as non-exempt. And so I'm going to ask Katie to look at some of those this year. And the reason he did that, one is an abundance of caution.
Yeah.
And because he asked me, I told him basically, look, as we get started, I'm pretty much going to have my hands in everything. So no one's doing anything that I don't know about. But now we're getting an organization and people are given more freedom. If Katie can take it on, well, I'm going to ask her to contact them to see if they can reclassify. But I couldn't. I showed him to Jason Krisner, the classifications, and I said, what do you think? He says, well, I could see, I don't agree with all of these, but the problem is you have a consultant already on record that said that these are non-exempt. So we just kept it that way. So almost everyone's here hourly. And most of the people are like, what? We haven't been hourly in forever.
And honestly, that is the move. That is a very big trend right now. It is, if siding on the caution, you side more on the hourly side versus the salary side, because salary testing has become so specific.
Yeah, and it's become very contentious, and it's a huge, in Florida in particular, it's a high litigation area.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're almost all hourly except for me and Christy.
Mm-hmm.
No one's allowed to work on the weekends unless they ask. You can't check your email. That's all in the handbook, and we enforce that. If someone does that, they get a no, don't do that ever again, because of all the lawsuits and all that. So that's our situation right now. Does that answer your question?
So that is why there was, I added this specific travel policy to explain to hourly employees about when to get paid and when to not be paid.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Lee. Yes.
So if you're a passenger in the car, you do not get paid.
Katie, can you,
Well,
chairman
honestly,
asked. Okay, she heard you.
I did. So, yes. And honestly, more than likely, it can kind of, it's a bit at this, I'm going to say, is kind of a gray area, because if they discuss work and it's inside the office hours, it's technically a meeting and that's to be paid. More than likely, If it's in the general working hours and they are traveling together, you would pay both of them.
Yeah, assuming the travel was for work purposes, right?
Correct. So they're going, I'm saying, let's say they're going
to a conference, or they're going to a meeting,
Correct.
it's out of town, they're in the
Right.
car together, 8:30 to 5 or whatever, they're
Correct.
talking, it's paid time.
It's paid time. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is correct.
So Kate, if I understand it, you get paid for the working time that you would have been at work if you're away, but you don't get paid for anything extra as far as because you're away from home. You don't get those hours between
Right.
working hours.
Only time that, let's say, so the 8:30 to 5 is the standard, or anything your leader like makes you go to. It's not voluntary. So if there is an event afterwards that you are mandated to go to, that is paid time. If it's a voluntary event, that is not paid time.
So a reception would not be paid, but
correct, unless your boss said you have to be there, or you are hosting it, or whatever it might be.
Right.
That's when it's paid. But for you just to go and mingle and network on your own time, no, that's not paid time.
Okay, and if you're riding with you're not the driver, you're going to a meeting with somebody who's also going, and you're the passenger, you don't get paid?
No, you're still paid. If it's within the working hours, you're paid. What now?
They're still paid?
Yeah, they're still paid.
Yes, yes.
During work hours, they're still paid because they're still going to a meeting on behalf of. The flip side of that is if you're going in between offices during the day and you're driving, Lee, and something happens and you're in an auto wreck, the company's liable because you're on work time.
Right. Correct.
So there's
an element there as well.
Yeah.
Of workers' comp and liability and all the things.
But I never wanted to worry about.
Right. All the fun stuff that keeps me employed.
The question I have, because this is a government entity based upon a geographic county, is travel within the county, but outside the city of Gainesville, seen as travel, like going to a conference in Orlando versus just normal travel in the county. So if someone's business day begins in High Springs, they're meeting with a citizens group in High Springs, which is
15 minutes away.
15 to 45 minutes away. Are they calculated from headquarters in the city, or because it's a county organization would just be that's all county time? Because every time I've dealt with that, it's been something where you've been crossing county boundaries, or you're leaving a city, the city where the organization's based, but it's not a government entity that's responsible for an entire geographic area.
I mean, I think it just falls under the one-day assignment to another city.
Yeah.
You're paid for the time, and let's say we'll pay for the time traveling to and from the other city, except for the time the employee would spend normally commuting to and from work.
Right. And that's always how I've always seen those, is the time, your normal commute time does not count. And likewise, your normal mileage doesn't count toward any mileage reimbursement.
Correct. So if if it's an hour drive and I'm usually a half-hour drive, I have to take away 30 minutes and, 30 miles.
So I've always seen it as somebody who covered 12 counties.
Does that make sense, Bob?
Sure. I asked a question just because we
are
talking about government. We are talking about a county government as opposed to the government. And I have no what the county does, quite honestly, but I don't think that it pays attention to any travel within the county. I don't know that for sure.
It looks like it's saying.
Yeah, I think this is fine. I have no problem with this.
Okay.
So we'll add a public records broad general statement somewhere in the front of the employee handbook. So that'll be something different. And excuse me, Katie is going to supply us with a FMLA. Yeah. And we'll add that. So that'll be what's different, but those will be ready to go for Monday.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Katie, you can leave if you want to.
I'll be working on FMLA.
All right. Thank you.
Have a nice meeting, everyone.
Thank you very much.
All right, where to now, Colin?
Okay, go to page 43. Page 43 is some changes in the procurement policy.
Hang on. My scroller is trying to give me a hard time here. Okay, I'm there.
Okay. This one does a few things.
This is not redlined on page 43. There's no red line.
It's redlined.
Mine isn't.
Which one?
My page 43 is informal.
44. The first red line's on 44.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're still in one. No. You're still in one. You're still on the agenda. Where's your agenda? So look at the gray numbers on the corners.
Yeah.
Yeah, go to page 43. Yeah, the first red line is in 44. Let me just see what that is. I need to put my glasses on actually. Since I did these, why did I do these? Let's see.
You got rid of something.
Except as otherwise stated in this policy. All contracts for direct community services shall be entered into by use of competitive seal proposal. I X that out because there's all kinds of things. It's redundant. It's not necessary because there's all kinds. I'll explain. There's all kinds of ways to procure stuff in this policy, and there's no use to treat, funded services anywhere different. I'll just give you an example. If we want to do a program at UF in the rest of the procurement policy, and I'm just using UF as an example, because they're a government and a university and our policies, they're exempt from the competitive bid. We can just work with them. And there's exemptions like that all throughout our policy. We don't use them that much, but I didn't see any reason to, because you say accept, it pretty much is open everything. To me, it was redundant. So it's not going to change anything of how we practice. The big thing in here is removing the unsolicited proposals, because that's just not going the way it was intended. And what it does is, number one is, frankly, it just makes me look like, because it says the executive director should bring back, it makes me look like I'm making all the decisions and they're all going to be no, and I don't want to be in that situation. The other fact of the matter is if you look at our procurement policies, which are under tab, well, you don't have the notebook with you there, Maggie, but I think it's tab in our handbook. I need someone that has the tabs memorized. I think it's under tab 2. All our policies, and something got moved. Tab 2. If you looked at our procurement policies, the catch out is the trust can write a resolution, get 6 votes, and fund whatever it wants to fund anyway. So if someone comes and gives a great idea and 6 members want to vote for it, it can just fund it. So that is the tool to fund something that's unsolicited. I'm not saying the trust would ever do that, but we don't need the unsolicited policy to do what we want to do, because right now everything it's doing is bad. At least bad for me.
Well, I thought about this from a planning perspective, a budget perspective. This is not a good idea.
No.
But what we might want to do, and I will credit Maggie for this because she was so creative with that.
The COVID exemption?
In addition to the proposal, to the motion the other day, but what we might want to do is say in extraordinary circumstances and list, a pandemic or a national disaster or some sort of disaster. We might go outside the procurement process, and then it's in there, but it eliminates the unsolicited proposal.
Yeah. So just let me point out that does exist in our current procurement policies.
Okay.
So my only concern about just having nothing here, let me kind of, I want to make sure that we have a vehicle somewhere for hearing ideas that come from interest groups in the community who currently feel they're not being heard, or that the board doesn't understand what they bring to the table or doesn't value what they bring to the table. And I think that's kind of what we heard at the meeting from some of the folks in the general public. I agree completely that the process of just, ask us for money. I think people feel from whatever source encouraged to send in these proposals. The trust has all this money. You've got a great program. Go ask for funding. That doesn't work because it's unstructured, it's unorganized. You can't plan a budget. You can't plan your workflows. You can't manage any of that. But on the flip side, we're also hearing that there are people who think that the way the priorities are currently articulated and the way the funding is flowing in terms of order or sequence is ignoring some of the things that community members may think is important that they could bring to the table. My thought about that, Colin, is that maybe that's an opportunity for this youth collaborative, to be a place where not only do we provide technical assistance to people so they can jump through all the hoops when it's needed, but also some kind of a forum for when there is a community crisis. I'm thinking the gun violence currently, I'm thinking, the stuff Steve Pennypacker brought to the table months ago with the changes to Title IV funding, that there may be some situations where we need to have a vehicle that's not the planned budgetary process for soliciting proposals. It has to be solicited. I don't want this willy-nilly, just send Colin your best and greatest idea with no data to back it up, because that doesn't work. And thank you, Colin, for acknowledging the other day that I thought that it should be the rare exception, because I do. But I do think we need to have a mechanism. I do think we have a mechanism. We need a mechanism for some of those folks who currently don't feel like they have a voice in what we're procuring to have some impact on that procurement, what we procure and when, and the time frame for what moves up and down in the schedule of procurements. Lee, you're muted.
Maggie, how do you propose to do this?
Well,
because
yeah, I think we take this out of here.
And having done it for however many years, if there is not a process, it's a disaster. And so,
I agree. I do agree.
Now.
That's why I hated this unsolicited proposal thing, because I think it wreaks havoc. There's no workflow management. Ooh, somebody's got 2 devices plugged in is when that happens in Zoom. So what I'm suggesting is, do we have a vehicle? Perhaps it's the youth collaborative, but someplace where people can bring thoughts, ideas about that then become organized RFPs. So if there's a group that's actually out there, for example, generating some community discussion and community thoughts around how to manage the gun violence epidemic, how do we hear that and incorporate that in here so that organizations can come to us, or like Big Brothers, that suddenly has some major shift in their funding and suddenly needs emergency kind of relief. How do we hear that? How do we incorporate that? Not just send me a random proposal, because bless you, Christy, we don't need you chasing down 50 things at once, nor Colin. But I do think we heard loud and clear, and I think there's a message out there that I don't really want to spread, that we're not necessarily being responsive. Whether it's accurate or not, being presented accurately or not, I don't want that message out there. I think we need a vehicle.
I'm going to say one thing and then I'm going to let Christy comment. So I hear two different things, and if we could just segment them, that would be helpful. As far as the part that the procurement policy deals with is after you have the idea, right? So let's assume that we do have an idea. We go through whatever process that you would argue that we don't have yet, which I would agree. Once we come up with that and we have an idea and it's here in our hand, how do we contract it? And what I'm saying is we have, even taking out the unsolicited proposals, we have plenty of tools in the toolbox to do that. With the last one, if we can't figure out anything else, the very last one on the list is under the section in our policies under exempt from competitive procurements, where literally you just bring it to the board and have the board vote on it. I mean, so as far as the tools, I think the current procurement policy has enough tools. Sometimes you can competitively bid, sometimes you can contract with another government. We can piggyback. So for example, if someone got funded in CAP and it wasn't enough and they needed double the money, we could piggyback on that RFP and award based on those terms. I mean, we have a lot. We could piggyback on another Children's Services Council's RFP, and some have done those. For example, in Broward County, they just piggybacked off something Miami did and got agencies that did services in both.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's fine, Colin. I agree.
Dade County to do it up in Broward. So there's enough tools. So the other part is the governance part. And what role do community people have outside of the board in developing the priorities of the trust, right? So that is assigned to Christie's area. We just hired the last piece, a community engagement specialist. And we brought her in from Palm Beach, knowing she's not from the area, but she's already had to deal through some of these governance pieces. So she'll have to connect, and we'll need that, but how do we do that? And so that is something I've done. I mean, we spent, but it takes a long time. And that's the part where there's some patience. So when we redid our after school programs and got community, but it took us a year. We started a year in advance to get community input, focus groups, where the needs are. Ditto with things like school-based mental health in Duval. I'm not saying that's the best way to do it. Martin County does it another way. Every year they have they call it a community council. And it rotates between focus area. And there's a board liaison, there's people from the community, they incorporate, and that goes into their solicitation. So what you're concerned about, to me, what I'm hearing is more the governance piece. I think as far as the tools, once we get the ideas, we have ways to do them in this policy. And yeah, I'll admit, we haven't worked out the governance piece yet, but I also agree with you. And I'm gonna let Christy explain more. I think the youth development, I can't get all the letters right. I'm gonna turn it over to Christy because I don't know what all the letters mean, but that is the first step to do what you said. So would you fill Maggie in on kind of how we're, speak loud. She should be able to hear you through mine.
Okay. So Maggie, what we have is the Youth Development Capacity Building Collaborative. It's that collaborative.
Can you move closer?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's that collaborative that I was presenting to the board on the 13th. And so through that collaborative, right now we have about 20 or 22 different youth development organizations signed up for that. And it's a full process of us getting to know them and them getting to know us. There will be monthly meetings where we're able to discuss best practices, what their suggestions are, and just an opportunity for us to get that feedback from them on a number of things, not only how their organizations are operating, but just what are they seeing as it relates to those children? What are they seeing? What are some of the issues, the challenges? What's working well and what isn't, so that we can begin to brainstorm not only out of school time programming, but some of those wraparound services, what that looks like, and the type of assistance that they really need to thrive, through within Alachua County for 6 to 18.
I think it would be really helpful to focus on that the aspect of it, because the message we heard several times last meeting that concerned me was that we weren't listening. We lacked a sense of urgency, and that the same people as always are sitting at the table, and that those people don't know what's really going to work in these communities. And I don't think that's the case. I think I may not know everything, and I may not have certain kinds of lived experience, but I do know some things that could be helpful. And I think we have to figure out a way that that message doesn't spread, that we're not listening and we don't have a sense of urgency about some of the things. And the other thing I heard that cautions me about making this, you need these skills in order to effectively apply for our funding. The message that was being heard, which I don't think is entire, from my perspective, I think some of what we were saying, which is a lot of these organizations are too small to have the kind of technical skill and capacity that we're talking about, but they don't see themselves that way. And I think unless we bridge that gap, my fear is, will these folks participate in that collaborative? And I think stressing what they don't have versus what they have from a PR perspective is a problem. Just purely my takeaway as I watched, and maybe it's because I was sitting directly at, making eye contact with these people, but that were there and unhappy. But I think we need to be mindful of that as we create, maybe listen before we help, which I think we need to just put flip the cart and the horse a little bit around some of these organizations. Because I do think they have things that add value. And I also think that they are missing some key things, but I also think they're very influential. And I think we need to figure out a way to incorporate them and include them.
So I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Focus more on what they can bring to the table, because you're right. There are some of them that have had a great impact in the areas that they are working in, but then they are lacking certain things to be able to continue the funding. So I hear you loud and clear, and we can make that, we can adjust, and modify, how we are approaching or describing certain things to focus more on, their positive impact instead of what they're lacking. Now, I also think that the more we work with organizations such as the Community Foundation, and there was another one you mentioned, I just don't have my notes in front of me right now, the nonprofit something.
The Center for Nonprofit, the one that got trashed immediately after I mentioned it, CNE. Yeah.
Right.
And I can give that feedback to Barzella, that perhaps part of what Center for Nonprofit Excellence also needs to do is get some of their workshops to be at hours that folks that have full-time jobs elsewhere can actually attend. And I can certainly provide that feedback to Barzella. I think it's very helpful feedback.
Yes, and I'm hopeful that we can, bridge the gap between a lot of our grassroots organizations and help them establish those relationships with those organizations. Because there have been times where I've asked the question, what classes are you able to attend with the Community Foundation? Or are you aware of what they are offering you, because it can assist you with getting established so that you can qualify for these dollars at the trust? And many of them just may not have participated, didn't have the time, it didn't work out for their schedule. So I am hopeful that with what we're doing, the relationships that we're establishing with those organizations, that we can bridge that gap and encourage many of the organizations to get involved and just help them in some way, a lot of the technical assistance.
So just to bring us back around, it sounds, Colin and Lee, let me know if you agree that we've got enough in the procurement policy to accommodate just about any kind of funding mechanism we need, that the unsolicited bid piece just creates havoc and confusion. And so I'm comfortable with eliminating that, assuming that just we attend to this other, so that people get the sense that they are going to be heard and there are going to be opportunities to fund things that are more innovative and newer and more grassroots in their origin. Is that we good? Are you good with eliminating that clause, Lee? It sounded early on like you were.
Yes, I'm very much in favor of it.
Okay.
Maggie,
Yes.
how would you suggest we in the budget there is 50,000 for Reimagine Gainesville? How would you suggest we talk about that?
So
That's my.
So Reimagining Gainesville is really a thought incubator. And Carla Lewis knows it well because she's one of the advisory board members for that, advisory group members for that. So I think it's an opportunity for the trust to recommend that people take new ideas that are not fully fleshed out somewhere where they can get a lot of support for fleshing it out and creating a business plan and a budget and all of the kinds of things that's that results-based accountability would require. So I think that's an excellent opportunity for folks to work with and use as an incubator, and to say the trust is putting money in there knowing that some of these ideas are so new that they need to be fleshed out before they can be turned into any kind of proposal or a request for proposals. And that's how I would present that.
But you don't see that in any way mollifying some of the people that were.
I think
that's
part
not
of
an
it is,
answer.
but the problem with the mollification is that they don't understand how hard it is for you to get money on the street. You know, what they heard is there was going to be a trust. They hear that we got $5 million last year that we didn't spend, and that all of the same old people are sitting around that table holding this money back when there's so much need in the community. That's what they hear. So I think that what we need, the best way to mollify that, I think, is to be exceedingly clear. How long do the other trusts take before they start putting money on the street? You know, what's the actual process of defining priorities and getting the money out on the street? And that we want to make sure that the money goes to things that are really effective and really going to turn the needle. But a lot of these smaller organizations function so day to day that any delay, when they think, especially I knew when the money went out for the stuff that was supposedly one time, I knew everybody would come back, because one-time money is never seen as one-time money. It just, human nature don't work that way. And so I think that the best we can do, and the only thing we can do, is to create a forum for ideas to come in, and then be very transparent about the steps we're going through to decide what to fund, what kinds of things to fund, and when to fund them. And that we are creating this forum for people to bring ideas and a bridge to the partnership for Reimagining Gainesville, so that new ideas that are very, very raw can get vetted.
And then they go through the RFP process. Is that the thought?
Yeah. Yeah, but I think if we hear a lot, if you start to hear, if Christy and that group, the collaborative, start to hear lots of noise about a particularly hot issue, then that is something that should come back to the board. This is an urgent thing we're hearing from the community. It's outside our current procurement. What do you want us to do? Do you want us to do some reprioritizing? There's somebody, we're getting echo from someplace.
Hey, Lee, can you shut off your mic on your computer?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Lee, I'm sorry, I couldn't make out most of what you were saying.
Okay, then I need to unmute it.
No,
I can hear you just fine.
Hear you.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Then,
yeah.
Okay, mostly it's from Colin. How is it going to work? We have this area where people get together and they talk about it. They talk about an idea that it's not fully vetted. They come up with an idea. They want it financed. Where does that money come from in our budget?
If someone came up with an idea from the community, the first thing I would do is I would send it to, we have a research planning and evaluation person, and we'd gather some of our own data. We might do a literature, we might do something to see what's been done other places. And we do our own vetting of the idea before we brought it to the board. I think Maggie said reprioritizing. So we haven't even fully funded our priorities yet, although the changes in the budget fund all but about 6. And between match, and we do have, Maggie, going back to your comment, we do have a proposal for the resource centers that we plan on addressing at the October board meeting. And that would be one where the board would have to vote to do it, because by that time, if it's acceptable, because by that time the unsolicited proposal thing would be gone. But you'd have to, if we had no more money, you'd have to reprioritize simply.
Right.
The other thing is what we haven't had a chance to do, but what I told the team in here we would do is every March, we kind of know, if there's salary lapse dollars in programs, if we're not going to spend, that's also a time for us to reduce some contracts if there's no chance of them spending them, and taking the rest of that and reprioritizing the second half of the year. So that's kind of our job to manage that.
And what I was thinking, Colin, in terms of reprioritizing was more of, we initially thought we were going to issue RFPs for after school care first, mental health second, family safety third, and then something comes up in the external environment that says, oh no, we need to move safety up. Let's move getting that procurement out the door faster than we initially intended, because there's some exigent community issue. That's more what I was thinking, and not necessarily reprioritize dollars. I mean, right now we're sitting, even in the budget we're going to approve, there's almost 2 million, is it, in unallocated?
You haven't looked at the changes.
I looked at page 35, and there's still a ton at the bottom that says unallocated.
No, you got to look at page.
It's been revamped.
You got to look at the, and if on our agenda, I don't know where.
Was I looking at it? Well, we can talk about this because I don't want to take the time here to do that. I can look at that later. I may have been looking at an older version of the agenda, because I looked at the page 35 that you signaled, and I thought I was looking in the right place, but.
No, page 43. It's page 43 in the public hearing agenda.
Okay.
There's only 383,000 left unallocated.
Okay.
And what you're going to find is at the meeting, we'll have a plan to give all of that money out, I would say by the first of the year.
Okay.
So we'll be done for this year. And so then it'll be, but next year we won't put aside money for the building. We'll probably have another 750 to a million, maybe more, maybe less, but somewhere in that range for next year. And so typically to get that on the street by October 1, you're starting in March, so we'll finish this year. And then by March, we need, if we want to get money out by October 1, we'll have to start putting that solicitation or solicitations together. Right. So we're finally getting on a schedule. Right. And so when I say reprioritizing, what I mean is typically we would, ideally we would take a look at a different priority area every year. We get on some kind of cycle. I mean, this is one way to do it. And that's when we would think about reprioritizing. For example, getting old is rough. Names aren't coming to me like they used to, but I think it's
just
King,
wait.
Is it King? Candace King, thinks that, and I agree with her. And I told the board in January we'd come up with some new indicators, but we're not prioritizing oral health, which is a big need in Alachua County. She has some ideas, and I said, let us get through the budget, and then we'll sit down and talk about ideas. So that may be something that we add to the priority list, and maybe something else goes off, or we add it, but we decide to fund it next year with some of the new money coming in. So that's how I envision and she's
that makes sense. And that makes a whole lot of sense to me. I just think that people need to understand that they can bring conversations. It might not immediately lead to funding, because I think that what people are hearing, wrongly, quite likely, is, oh, just come talk to us about any idea, and then it can come through as an unsolicited proposal and you're good to go.
Right. And to that point, Maggie, I think we have to be realistic to in this process to see that there are people that are actively trying to undermine the trust.
Yes, believe me, I'm aware.
And you have people that are, we talk about communication. Well, they're saying we're not giving out money. Well, that in fact is not true. We've given out, we've given out over millions of dollars. Over 4 million. But we're not spending it. And the other part is, you said something about, we're not reacting. Well, somebody may propose something, and we turn it down because it didn't seem like a good idea. Well, we're going to get bad now because that was their, you know, so there has to be.
I totally get that. Believe me, I totally get that. I spent a lot of years on the receiving line of why aren't you doing X, Y, or Z? And, you know, why aren't you providing X, Y, and Z? So trust me. And when you don't, all hell breaks. I get it. But I just want us to be as insulated from that kind of PR as possible by being as honest and forthright and consistent as possible with how we address these things. And that's
I think what you're proposing, you know, makes sense, and it's a good way, but because of the agendas that are out there, I don't think that even then it seems that we're going to have people that are actively going to work with the
absolutely. Yeah. I just want to minimize the amount of incoming if we can.
Yeah. And it really sucks, really, because what we're trying to do is good. So
anyway. I just want to make sure I have, so Dr. Labarta, basically we're good on the procurement thing. And what really you want to hear from us is, I view this as governance, right? How the community, you know, there's a board, but community. And so we just got some new folks, and we kind of really need to work out a governance plan, and it's high on our list. So we heard whatever the message was at the last board meeting, we heard it, and you know, we'll respond as fast as we can. I think our collaborative is step one, but there's other things we need to do.
And I think that when I present that this procurement policy is something that the unsolicited proposal policy is being eliminated, what I plan to say is, and you know, the discussion around it, the feasibility of its elimination is that there are other parts of the procurement policy that can handle any need that comes up, and that the staff are going to be working to ensure that voices are heard around priorities and issues, and that the youth collaborative would be an excellent place to participate so that that voice is always heard and available. So if you could echo that in your messaging, I think that, you know, then we will have said, yes, this is going away, but it's not because there isn't a place to be heard. And then, you know, whatever the incoming is, the incoming is.
Yeah.
Man, you're a silver-tongued devil.
Okay. So
it was purely self-defense most of the time, Lee.
Yeah. Amen.
Is there any more to discuss on the procurement? Then are we good on that one?
I think we're good.
Okay. So for the next meeting, Mr. or Madam Chair, the general, I hope we can get through all this. If you go back to the schedule, we're supposed to discuss kind of more general administration. I think in meridian terms on some of the policies, that's, you know, where, you know, in there now, the only thing we have is our, you know, board attendance and I forgot what's in there. Board attendance, public comments, and something else.
So
but I know in Meridian's policies, yeah, you talk all about, you know, you reference, you know, the purpose of your organization, the strategic plan. I was wondering, Maggie, if you wouldn't mind, because there's some good ideas and helping me focus, is just taking that and circling some you'd want me to look at. Literally, also
appropriate. Yeah, so let me just take 2 minutes and say a little bit about the way Meridian's board policies are written, because they're weird. Yeah. Meridian probably several years after I became CEO, so maybe 2003 or 4, adopted a policy governance model that comes by a couple named Carver, and it's a Carver board model. And the notion behind the way they structure their thinking about boards is that the main function of the board is to represent the community as to both what its needs are and what it wants to have accomplished to meet those needs, and also how it governs itself. It's very focused on the fact that their only employee is the CEO and everybody else is not theirs to govern in any way, shape, or form. And that as a board, because their responsibility is to outcomes and values, rather than having industry-specific knowledge, the policies are written around how the board is structured. That's the first whole section, and how it governs itself. The second section is how it delegates its authority. And then the third section is something called executive limitations, which is where the board articulates its values. And it's a series of prohibitions rather than requirements, very intentionally, because the notion is that as a board that is not an expert in whatever it is the organization provides, it can better imagine basically what would really offend them rather than what creative things the CEO and through the CEO the organization can accomplish, right? So it might never have occurred to Meridian's board, for example, that a primary care clinic within Meridian was a good idea. That was our initiative. But it certainly, they would know that losing a certain amount of money, embezzling funds, not having a DEI plan, not having structured personnel policies and doing certain things, those would offend the values of the board. And so that's why there's that whole series of policies that are thou shalt not. And mostly because of the way the delegation of authority works, they also all read the CEO shall not permit, and then a long list of things that I should not have been allowed to permit. Within all of that, there are still some good, because that's, and a lot of them you've taken care of here with the HR policy, whistleblower, DEI, all of that stuff. Some of the really valuable ones, I think, are the ones that talk about how the board governs itself, in terms of roles and responsibilities, and also then the delegation of authority ones. And so I will look through those and kind of highlight some that are the best. Some of them are in there because they're required under our accreditation. We're required under Meridian's accreditation standards. Some were required by Lutheran and DCF contracting. But a lot of them came straight out of a Carver sample board manual that then got delineated down. So that's the structure of what you're reading. And I have new board members who always go, this is really weird. and they are. But they helped to really solidify the notion that the board is governance and staff is. And then the fourth section is what are supposedly ends policies, which set the tone for what it is you're trying to achieve in a very results-based accountability kind of way. And that was our strategic plan. So our board simply adopted the strategic plan as amended every year as its ends policies.
And so for us, if you look at our budget document, the strategies are, so when you adopt the budget, you're kind of adopting our plan and all of that. So the question I have for Bob is, because when I first read the Carver, I have all the Carver stuff in my office. I reread it. The conversation we had is Maggie said, ooh, I'm not sure if this will work in government. Because typically, thou shalt not is not how public officials, at least my experience.
So you can just flip the double negatives.
Yeah, it's more you don't do anything unless you have the authority to do it. Bob, would you agree with that? Or, yeah, so this idea that, so I'm not sure. So we'll take a look at it.
Flip them. If you look at most of them, they're double negatives. So flip the double negative and it just says, the CEO shall instead of the CEO shall not, You can flip them. Most of them are double negatives. And if you flip them, they work just fine. The question is what does and doesn't apply. I mean, things, stupid stuff that everybody believes. You're not going to overspend your budget. You can't overspend your budget. You can't not procure things competitively. So instead of saying you can't not, you say you shall, follow competitive procurement policies. You shall, and they flip around and work. What I would always want to stay clear of is things that tie Colin's hands unnecessarily. And that's the notion that I talked about of, I don't know what he knows about these kinds of projects that are possible. I come to the board with a set of experiences and expertise, but not broad enough to know what he knows and what Christy knows and then gives to him, et cetera, et cetera. So what I would love for us to do is not create prescriptive policies that tie staff's creative hands. And then get us into management as opposed to governance.
That's fine. Right. No, we're having a conversation about the specifics of your handbook.
Lee has started thinking about his tractor. We've hit an hour and a half, so I can see it already. It's so predictable, right in an hour and a half. So yeah, if you'll circle something, I will say, go ahead, Christy.
I was going to ask about the sponsorship that you talk about that, because that's one of those policies that require us to go back to the board.
Yeah. Christy wanted to make sure we covered sponsorships. I think we did. Yeah. I think it's in there. Well, I think, let's double check.
Yeah, because I think it's crazy. Once we've given you an allocation, you should be able to, again, why are we going to get in your way when some of those things come in with very little notice? Once we've given you that allocation.
Yeah, so sponsorships has been deleted. Yeah, I mean, it has not been deleted. That section about board approval just says we'll report to the board who we gave sponsorships to.
Perfect.
Yeah, yeah, that's been changed.
Good.
Okay, so there were a few, now there was a couple policies in there I liked that were a little bit to me out of the box, but there's a surveying the board members after every board meeting to see if they got, you know, what they thought of the meeting. I thought that was a great idea.
We did that Dr. every year, and part of the agenda packet for the following meeting was the survey results and comments.
Yeah, that's a little bit more work for us, but I think that's a great idea. That would
we did it on SurveyMonkey. Didn't take very long at all. Or we did it, initially we just did it on paper and my secretary used to tabulate it. And then just give the average. And
yeah, I think it's a great idea.
And the other thing, which is a board best practice, is once a year for the board to do a self-evaluation.
Yeah.
And that's just a standard board best practice.
Yeah. So if you'll circle,
I'll look at those. Yeah, I'll look at those and I'll circle the ones that I think are the most appropriate. I mean, we had a lot of stuff on patient rights and those kinds of things that obviously don't apply.
And in my view, we don't have to have all of these done. These I wanted to get done before the new year started, but everything else, you know, I mean, we have 3 meetings scheduled, if this is okay with all of you, but we have 3 meetings scheduled, and then, you know, if the winds align and the stars and all that, then at the January meeting, we can address the rest of these and adopt them. But, you know, that, so we don't stick right to the schedule or something like that. Are you okay with that? Because it does give us till through December to be.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Okay.
We handled the most important one, which is as you said and Maggie said, that we're trying to get it on a schedule. Okay, what we do today will help do that. You know, the other things that we're doing is really, you know, I don't think really is going to delay that.
Okay.
With the remaining things that we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Would you like to adjourn the meeting?
I would love to adjourn the meeting.
Hang on there. Ashley thinks we forget.
We could general public comments. We have no cards, but it would be appropriate for me to talk about the things that I saw in the policies or not.
We're at these policies or the other ones?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what Ashley was saying.
She wanted to know if it was appropriate for her to bring up something that she saw in the policies.
Sure.
Okay, on page 18.
You're talking about the gray box or the bottom box?
The gray box.
Okay.
Page 18 of that employee handbook, and it's acting in good faith.
Okay, which section is it? I'm trying to, it's hard to hear you because I know you're not right by the mic.
18B.
Page 18B.
Okay.
D as in dog.
Oh, D as in dog. Okay.
I was just wondering if we could read through that really quick, because it sounds like it may be a little bit contradictory with the or in the parentheses. And just let me know if you read it that way.
No, I read, it reads fine to me.
Yeah. I think the issue you have is someone in good faith could make a complaint that turns out to be without probable cause, meaning unsubstantiated. Would that subject them to discipline? It was made in good faith based upon their best knowledge. Not made maliciously, just as it turns out it's investigated and there's nothing there.
Wasn't that covered under the whistleblower?
Well, arguably it is, but then you say the act of making allegations that prove to be unsubstantiated could subject you to could subject you to disciplinary offense. Now, I think an argument can be made that if you read what's in the parentheses as a unified whole, that kind of takes it out of that. But it could be seen as an inconsistency. And I think that's something that you could discuss with Katie.
Yeah, I could see where it would be. Bring that to Katie, I think, and see whether that she can take care of that. I could see where it could be misread.
But it's given clear instance when it raises to that that's serious.
No, I agree.
It says maliciousness, recklessness, or
but it could just it does separate the making an unsubstantiated allegation. It does raise the potential of that being seen as, well, anytime you're proven wrong, then you're not acting in good faith.
I mean, perhaps if you say that, when you make it, it's known to be unsubstantiated.
So will you let Katie know about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Number 2, page 21. The paragraph that starts normal work hours. It says the normal work hours are 8:30 to 5:30. Is that correct?
Is it 8:30 or to 5? Because I thought I saw 5.
I don't know. Someone tell me what the normal work hours are.
It's 8:30 to 5, but I thought we were just using that as an example because I did see that earlier.
Yeah.
It's just an example, or is it our normal work hours? Our work hours are 8:30.
Yeah, and some people, we can adjust their work hours if we have to or something.
Yeah, so it says EG, it doesn't say IE.
It says EG.
Yeah, it's EG, not IE, so I would say it's fine.
Okay. Lastly, page 22. In the first paragraph on the page, after it says, for example, if an employee drives a car as a matter of personal preference, when an authorized flight or another travel mode is available, the travel time by car would exceed that of the authorized mode, and then only the authorized mode will be compensated. However, elsewhere in the policy, it also says that we take the transportation that is the most economical as a whole. So if driving is more economical as a whole, even with the employee time and the cost of the rental car or not, and the flight is more expensive, but it hasn't authorized, I wonder if this is an appropriate.
Well, then you wouldn't authorize it, would you? Wouldn't you authorize travel by car if it was less expensive? You'd authorize travel by car if it was less expensive than flying. And this becomes an interesting issue because we've had situations where there's been ADA issues.
Travel except me.
There's ADA issues and the person says, I have a phobia of flying, so I take train or I drive. So this gets, so I think that's why the word authorized is in there. It's just basically to say you just can't do it because you want to. You can't take a 3-day drive when an air fly, because you wouldn't authorize that. You'd authorize the most efficient way. I think, but bring it up to Katie and see what she says, Colin.
Well,
good catches. Okay. All right. Maggie. Anything else? If not, I think we having no.
Yeah, I got one more. Got one more FYI.
Lee wants to get back to his tractor.
I know. Well, I mean, I'm going to do a quick, what do you call it? Find and replace. There's places we didn't know we were going to have an HR department. It was all going to be the finance and administration manager, but I'm just do one more check. And any place we find that, we're just going to change it. And so that might show up as well.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. All right. Okay. Thank you all.
And Colin, if you could send those changes to us beforehand.
Yes, please. And if you could bring my binder on Monday.
Yep.
Since I'm not there. Colin, do you want to stay on with me and we had scheduled a few minutes to talk, or do you want to just do it by phone?
Yeah, let me just run to my office and call you. Can I do that? Because I'm up in this conference. Okay, yep. Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
See you Monday.
See you Monday.